To start the session. I'm, of course, Sue Vola, and we are doing these webinars as previews to our annual conference. This year, on July 18th to 20th, we will be at George Mason University out in Manassas near Dulles Airport, and we're very excited about the fact that this location has given us access to a couple of sectors that we want to be sure that we hit. The whole purpose of the conference is to move the industry ahead. So people that come share. They're not there selling their services. They're there to share what the learning has been. So, for instance, I'm sure Gary and Peter will talk about the complexities of designing for different environments and what they've learned about having to do that. And that's the idea, so that we serve both people purchasing games so that they learn how to do that, and we serve people who are making games so that they can make better games. I think everyone coming to the conference is an evangelist about the fact that serious games and playful learning experiences help with learning across the board. We're talking about in a school, in a museum, or in a corporation. So it's a very pragmatic-oriented conference, and we hope all of you will come and benefit from that. All right, I think, guys, I think we probably could go. Darius, you can take me off and just turn it over to Peter and I'm excited about having you guys this summer.
Thank you so much, Sue. Thanks. All right. Well, welcome everyone to this webinar on creating playful learning spaces. Thank you so much for sparing your time. My name is Peter Stidwill, senior producer at Fablevision Studios.
And I'm Gary Goldberger, and I am the president and one of the co-founders here at Fablevision.
So a little bit about Fablevision Studios to get started.
Even before we get started, just to let everybody know, we have another computer over here that we'll be looking at. So if there are any questions while we're going through any slides, feel free just to write, and we'll just kind of pull those out instead of saving all the questions for last.
Yeah.
Why don't we do it the way we have all groups? So
absolutely,
so we could do that in real time.
Yeah.
All right.
Put your questions into the chat, and we'll respond to those.
I didn't mean to interrupt.
That's no problem. So a little bit about Fable Studios. We are Boston's full-service media production company. We have now for more than 20 years been using media, storytelling, technology to make the world a better place. We do that through creating apps, websites, games, animations, videos, you name it, anything to do with media, and we're on the case. We work with a wide variety of partners. It ranges from publishers, broadcasters, educational and non-profit organizations, museums, hospitals, healthcare organizations, the full range. So it's great that one day we'll be designing an app for a phone, and we'll also be working on designing a very specific installation for a museum. And obviously in today's webinar, we're going to be talking a little bit more about the latter.
Yeah, and typically clients are coming to us and partners are coming to us to get people to either think differently or act differently depending upon their content area. And then we look at the whole range of media that we're able to produce, and we create the appropriate things. So sometimes it's a game, sometimes it's a linear animation, sometimes it's an interactive, but it really depends upon what that goal of that learning experience is. Just think of that.
Great. So today we're going to be talking about creating and designing inclusive and creative learning environments that support kids and their families across generations. And we're going to be asking the question, how do we do that? How do we create those inclusive and creative learning environments? One thing that we do when we think about these spaces is we think about what these types of open spaces enable us to leverage. So we think about what opportunities exist for kids parents and grandparents to develop connections together. So this one example of where this happens is when generations sit together to eat and socialize. It may be that they're meeting with friends and extended family as well. But one particular opportunity that we like to leverage is the idea of play. So the classic sort of example is a family playing a board game together. So we know that this can offer a lot of opportunities for cross-generational socializing and working together and learning as well. So in the types of activities and interactives that we want to create, we're looking for kids and their families to be discussing things, to be thinking up new ideas, and also be connecting to the real world and potentially creating new thoughts and new experiences. And play, there's a lot of research that shows this, and I think everyone in the space understands. Play really allows for deeper development of connection to content, but also allow generational kind of component that kind of more formal learning experiences don't offer. So I want to talk a little bit about the kind of design approach that Fablevision uses when we work with our partners to create experiences for informal learning spaces. As I mentioned, they really offer a different way for us to be able to foster communication between generations. So it's things outside of the normal the normal kinds of learning experiences that we think about. So the challenge that we see that we're addressing in a lot of cases is that we want to ask the question: how do we stop the audiences designing for rushing through a particular space, whether that's a museum or some other environment? We would like them to slow down, have a conversation with each other, and also to talk to other people, potentially strangers within that space as well. Museums, by their very nature, are social, fairly unstructured spaces. So we asked, how do we encourage dialogue between people within that space who might not otherwise want to interact with each other? So it's important that it's not just, we're not just thinking about families and the intergenerational aspect within families, but also try to get people to talk to each other who may be from different socioeconomic backgrounds, different genders, just interactions that wouldn't normally be fostered. So that's our kind of design challenge. And I want to just talk you quickly through the overall approach that Fablevision takes when we work with partners. So the first thing that we do is we assess the content and the learning goals that we are trying to address in a particular project. So we look at that very closely. We'll work with our partners, we'll work with stakeholders, we'll work with the target audience as well to really understand that content and the skills. And then we'll come up with a range of rough concepts. So we'll try and do this fairly quickly. We'll produce a variety of concepts that we can then quickly take to the audience and to our stakeholders as well to do user testing. So this aspect is key before we get too far. Before we kind of become wedded to an idea or spend too much of the project time on a particular idea, we will get user testing and we'll get the feedback in conjunction with our partners. And then we'll be able to narrow down on a particular idea or maybe a couple of ideas at that stage, and we'll produce a more detailed design, and we'll produce more fleshed out art that will work together. And it's key that those things are working together. Our game design or our interactive design works together with our art and is producing a great experience for the end users. So that's really like an overarching description.
Very high production.
Very high, yeah.
High level.
So what we
production process.
what we thought we'd do is really jump into some aspects of our portfolio and show you things that we've created and talk about some of the challenges as we were creating those projects and some of the successes. And I think it will be really helpful for you to see some examples.
Yeah, and we'll talk about any failures along the way, because those exist for sure.
Yeah.
So I'm gonna explain about a project that we did with the Vancouver Aquarium called Snaps. And Snaps was actually a venture that Fablevision and the Vancouver Aquarium went on together. We actually formed a new company. The goal for the company was to create an application that was to be used in multiple informal learning spaces. That was the initial conceit. And the goal was, can we create, well, originally the goal was, can you make Angry Birds for fish? Which we said, well, no, we can't make Angry Birds for fish because it's not appropriate. But what we can do is look at what the needs of the informal learning space of the aquarium is and see if we could create models that are replicable across multiple venues. And so we took a deep dive. We went into the museum, learned about what their pain points were of the aquarium staff, of the marketing team, of the program officers, and really kind of discussed what they needed out of a mobile game. High level, what they really were looking for. Sometimes it was looking for, well, we need to be able to control the flow around our around the aquarium. Sometimes people just bolt to the penguin, and how do we get them to see areas and exhibits that aren't often visited? Is there a way that we could use the game to do that? Can we use a mobile game to really observe the environment that the family or group is going through versus looking at their phone? Because we didn't just want people looking down at their mobile device. We wanted to kind of have people kind of look around, observe, share, and also have that conversations around, either within their family or within other groups and other visitors. The other thing that they were really interested in was to have it not just be for the one-time visitor, that we could have a multiple visitor leveled game, so that it wasn't just, oh, I come in, I play, and I'm done with the game, but they wanted it to last over multiple visits and really support their members as a benefit for the value of the membership. And then after, as we were progressing, the marketing group wanted to use the application as a communication tool to their members or the players about other events that were going on within the aquarium. So those were kind of like the high level, like, oh, this is what we're going to do. And so we kind of went in, we did a bunch of prototyping within the aquarium. We did a lot of paper prototyping. And so our design approach, here's some of the games. At the time, it was now it probably would be a different technology, but at the time, we set QR codes all around the experience, and you could see some of them in the displays. And our goal for the gameplay was really a one-button experience. What we did was we created a game that players would come up, they would scan QR codes, they would get one of 4 different types of challenges. Sometimes it was take a picture, sometimes it was answer this quiz based on observation, sometimes it was tell a story about your own experience, sometimes it was just trivia. And so we used this game in order to kind of progress through the aquarium and different spaces. At the end of the game, on different levels, throughout the game, you can see on the bottom there's coins, and there's a map of the museum. There's also other information that you could get about the museum, which is the plus button. Basically, they would get to the QR code, hit that snap it now. They would snap it, and then the screen would change. So this little next screen you're seeing is like take a picture, and that was one of the playables. As you progress through the game, you would be scored, and after your first visit, if you got 4 snaps codes, you would go to the gift shop and you would actually get a coin. So we were trying to connect it to the physical space. It's not something you could do in a normal game that isn't in a location, and it basically progressed where you would get 4 different levels of coins based on returning visitation.
And I think another cool thing about this app was that we worked with the aquarium to allow the staff there to populate the challenges, so they could highlight specific animals or exhibits and attractions.
Yeah, and we did a deep dive with their content creators, and they do have a great staff and an educational program that they also wanted to extend into the application. So that was another thing. Yeah, thank you for pointing that out. We then worked with the Royal Botanical Gardens and took the same application, took their content, and were able to put it into the Snaps version of the Royal Botanical Gardens. The interesting thing about this is that the Royal Botanical Gardens in Canada is 200 miles versus the aquarium, which is in a single cement building with pools around the outside. So there were different challenges on making sure that our snaps were weatherproof, making sure that we were able to kind of point people to where they might get additional challenges. Both were dealing with it the same way, so we were kind of created a CMS in the back end so we could upload and download content when needed. But it was just another way that we were able to use the application. We then took that experience and tried to bring it into non-museum locations, and that was the goal, and which actually did not happen. I just want to let everybody know. We were looking at high traffic areas that were content void. So that was the kind of thinking on the business model, was that like, oh, well, in a museum, there's so much to see and there's so much content, and there's another delivery mechanism. But what if you were in an airport where there isn't any content? Or what if you're on, so we were looking at content void places to bring the application, and we just didn't get there on the business model. It was an interesting venture. They're still using the application in both locations, in both the Vancouver Aquarium and the Royal Botanical Gardens, but that's kind of where we kind of contained it at this point. Some of the things that we learned along the way was trying to educate users on the application itself, on like how do you download it, how do you get into it, how do you register. That was kind of a hurdle. We then also used it to send push notifications, and that was location based. So depending on how far away you are from the museum, you'll get different notifications. It was we got a lot of feedback about, oh, why am I getting so many? Because if you went over the border, the boundary, it would ping you. So if you were on a bus that kept going in and out of our location designations, you would get like 12 different notifications. So we had to kind of like nuance all that stuff. The content was all the content was actually pretty easy to kind of deliver. Sometimes the content creators wanted to get more in depth than we were able to do in a short ping of an experience. So knowing how complex to get, especially young audience, and how much we could deliver versus where do we want to point them to exhibits that are already kind of doing what they want to do. So kind of figuring out what questions the game was really good at answering or asking was a key point of the design process. So
great. And so the next example is from the Maritime Museum in Gloucester, and this is a game, a role-playing game about sustainable fishing practices. So what you're looking at here is a kind of top-down view of the digital game, a snapshot of the digital game. So you can see at the top there's things that are upside down, but this is meant to go on a kind of large touch-based tablet screen that would be in the center of the room, and then different players position themselves around the outside. And the learning goals here, in addition to sort of the sustainable fishing element, was really to get people to perspective take about the various different balances that need to take place in terms of so the players will approach the table from the sides, and one of the key design features here is that there's kind of a continuous play element, and people can actually leave the table and then come back to the and other people can join the table sort of midway through the game. You can still pick up on the game and still play and interact with the group. So that was one of the things that we really needed to design into this when we're thinking about the kind of casual nature that the audience is moving in and out of the space. So it allows for the continuous play. There's no sort of set winning or losing. It's a simulation where some of the players are playing as a kind of fishing fleets, and they can move their boats around and fish, and they get a score out of that, and they're obviously trying to fish as much as possible for that perspective. But then there are other perspectives, such as you can take on the role of the environment, where you can change various different scales and change the temperature, and you can actually change whether different events, storms, affect the playboard as well. So what we're looking to do with this kind of thing is to open people's minds to the complexities, to the various balances in a complex system, and that of course is something, as we all know, that games are really good for.
So Marsha asked what age group this was for.
Yeah, so this was from age 7 upwards. So, you know, and it's a co-play opportunity between adults as well. I think younger than that, and the game is a little more complex. So.
Yeah, and because of the information that players are getting in real time based on their movements, some of them is policy driven, and so there is a lot of text around policy that's focused more towards adults, you know, high school students, college students, and adults. So there are 2 levels of play, and that was one of the things that we were really trying to do, was to kind of meet players where they are. So, you know, a 7-year-old could come in and play and go fishing and have a nice experience, but there is a deeper content area that we wanted to use the game for.
Yeah, and there's an example on this next slide where you can see that the player can click to get further information that will then help them make decisions within the game.
On the top of the screen, you could see the text module around, I think that was whales. So.
Yeah, that's right. Looks like whales. Great. So, just another question come in. Is there a printout function so players can take home an artifact from the game experience, which in this game includes information? We didn't build that into this particular experience, but you know, the idea of taking something away from it is a really cool one.
Yeah, I like that idea. Yeah. So here, moving to there's one more question.
One more question.
Yeah, we'll stay there.
I think one of the variations on printing stuff out could be that it emails you something from the game.
It was kind of interesting because the technology was, you know, that touch board, that multi-touch tablet table, and so that was really kind of like the starting point for that game design, and the game design, you know, was constrained by that as well. game we actually developed in Flash, which was like the last Flash game that we ever developed, even while we were doing Unity and HTML5. It was just easier to actually develop on that in Flash, but it didn't allow us some other external components that we might have done normally. But even like allowing players to play the game at home, because the way that you had to enter the game was pretty hardware driven. So I think there's a lot to be done there, and that we're still in communication with them. So
yeah,
so this is part of an exhibit, and we're showing you a close-up. Part of an exhibit that we did for the New York Hall of Science, Charlie and Kiwi's Evolutionary Adventure, and this is a multiple media exhibit. I guess multiple media exhibit. Now, a lot of what we did was around different types of communication to talk about evolution. So here's a screenshot. We did some animations that were really story driven to explain complex topics such as evolution to kids, and they could sit and watch those stories. We also had interactive experiences in the exhibit as well as online, where kids could actually interact with finches and learn at a deeper level, kind of like how beak structures changed over time based on their environment. So we tried to bring this topic to a lower demographic that was closer to K through 3rd grade, while allowing information to be shared from the parent or the older generation. So it was a definitely 2-tier approach towards education. There was also a book that kind of came out of this that was published. So we were able to take the entire exhibit, bring it down to a storybook level, and create a hardbound book that was sold in the gift shop, and so that it followed the audience home. I don't know. I don't think we have any interactives here. No, I'm sure. So we did the time. It was a 15-minute animation. It was all about. We were using the technique of time travel with our time travel device, which is always useful in animation. Yeah. And it also kind of like broke down barriers. Once we went into animation, we were able to do things that we weren't allowed, that we couldn't always do in live action, which is one of the reasons that we went with an animated experience. So I don't know how much more there is to talk about.
Yeah. Okay, let's move on to another example.
Yeah. So if anybody's been to the New England Aquarium, which is down the street from us, last year they kind of redesigned their main exhibit, which is their main tank. And it was part of a whole overhaul that they were doing to refresh the experience and the user experience in the New England Aquarium. What they wanted to do was, create an experience that users could participate with the tank. I don't know if anybody's ever been there before, but what it used to be was you would go to the aquarium, and it's a spiral tank, or it's a cylinder tank that a spiral walkway goes up or down, depending on which way you go. And there used to be these really old backlit, heavy text, bad graphics, explaining the fish or animals that were in the tank. Some are fish, some are turtles. And so what happened, or what would inevitably happen, is they would lose that shark or the turtle. There would be a death in the tank. They would need to update the content. They couldn't update the content. It didn't work on multiple levels. There was no way to get any audience participation. So we were kind of charged with how do we create a more engaging experience. So we created this application, which is all around, and I think there's 10 or 12 different kiosks that are right in front of the tank. Allows people to identify the fish that are going by. and I'm saying fish, but I'm talking about all animals in the tank. And we wanted to do it so that anybody with any language, or whether they were a reader or non-reader, English speaker, non-English speaker, were able to do. So we created a heavily graphic interface, which is another one of those kind of design thoughts that how do we kind of make sure that our visual language is approachable by everybody? So you come up to the screen and it says, what is it? So let's say a shark goes by, I hit shark, and then it dives deeper in. It gives you these 4 different kind of components in the corners, which there are icons for, but I don't have that screen. Which is body shape, tail shape, color, and pattern. This actually be one of the. This got revamped. And so as you dive deeper, the fish that are shown that meet your category get smaller and smaller and smaller until you get to the fish. And then once you identify that fish or shark or turtle or ray, you're able to be like, that's my fish. And then you can see how many other people that day have also identified that fish or saw that fish. And then that data is also collected by the aquarium on a regular basis to see, oh, well, what fish are being seen the most. And depending on the depth of it, you'll see, different areas of the tank, because it'll say, oh, where in the tank did you find it? And so it kind of connects different audience members, different viewers, visitors to the fish more directly. They're participating, but also you can hear different conversations because they are kiosks. You'll hear the way that the aquarium is, there's these pods that you kind of walk into, and so you're kind of in a pod with other people, and people start questions about, oh, that's the fish, or oh no, that doesn't have a yellow belly, it has a black belly. And so you'll start hearing conversations around the identification versus what used to be there, where people just stand next to each other and stare, which is still a nice experience. But what we wanted to do was start that conversation, and this was pretty successful with that. And this is all data driven. So if a fish does get deceased, or there's no longer in the tank, or ones get added, we're able to kind of upload the database pretty quickly. And
maybe they can get alerted to it because no one spotted it.
And nobody spotted that redfish. So
what I love about this is that it's sort of scaffolding that sort of scientific skill of classification as well, where it's sort of asking you, okay, what sort of size, or what type, what size, and then identify the key aspects as well. So that's really cool.
Yeah. So are there any questions about that? There's also no printout feature on this. Just added. So here's a project that Fablevision has been involved in for about 5 years. This came out of a Department of Education SBIR grant with funding from Cisco Foundation and Motorola Foundation. And we were kind of tasked, and we were working with the Curry School of Education and Glenn Bull and his great content providers down there, and also the Smithsonian Institute on some of the content. And what we did here was we were looking at the trend of digital fabrication. And there was this quick movement that everybody is aware of. Oh, we need a 3D printer so that we could do digital fabrication. And there's a big challenge with that in the educational space. And this is very focused on educational, traditional educational institutions, as well as after-school programs, and then into informal learning spaces and fab labs. So we're like, okay, so these 3D printers are being put in. How do we teach design thinking to a smaller, younger demographic? So we're talking K through 3, 4th grade. How do we teach them design thinking? How do we get them involved in STEM? How do we use a constructivist approach to do that? And so we're looking at theory of least change in schools was, oh, well, why don't we create paper products? Because teachers know bulletin boards really well. They understand pop-ups. It's an inexpensive medium. And so we kind of started working with Dr. Peggy Healy Stearns and created Fab at Schoolmaker Studio. So the whole thinking and process behind this. Oh, do we have a video?
We have a video.
Okay.
Yeah. Now, just a warning, because of the webinar technology, the video may be a little choppy when it loads up. But we're gonna run this through. You should be able to hear the audio, even if the video is a little choppy.
Right. And this is a student that's been through a course, has used the program, and is kind of explaining the multiple levels that he went through to use the program.
Yep.
Great. And Oliver, moving on, tell me about your projects that you have here.
I'm doing a Fab Maker. So it's a digital art program by Fail Vision Peter Reynolds Company, and it runs off silhouette, portrait, and any type of paper. So you can print 2D objects like this cool horse mask, 2D pop-ups like a Easter Island, and 3D objects like I have a house. An automata actually works. The boy rows up and down. And so I'm actually, right here is a building that hasn't been taken off. Take off, you would pop out all the windows, pull this off, and fold it, and it becomes this.
Excellent. And Ryan.
So what he showed was the levels of the program and the different step-by-step activities, from the cutout to the pop-up to a three-dimensional object, all the way up to a motion automaton, which they're learning gears and different mechanical tools, which I think we have in the next slide. So we've been down this journey now, and it's been kind of through a couple different iterations of interface and design. We've partnered with Silhouette Studio in order to get hardware into classes that makes it easier to cut, or you could just use scissors. And then we're working to create a full STEM education curriculum around this and figure out how to integrate it into different content areas. So how to use it for writing and how to use it for science and everything else. And here's some more images of people creating tools. But the theory here is really kind of to allow them through the design thinking process. So have them create, give them a challenge, design a skate park. Let them build their ramps, let them test out their physical designs, see where the failures are, see where the successes are, and then build upon those. So it is really kind of that iterative design process that is kind of being done in real time in the classroom or in these after school programs. We're also integrating circuits into it. So now LEDs, there are simple machines, creating stereo speakers. So it's been a lot of fun to take this, and right now we're bringing it into the Bay Area Discovery Museum. They're using our application. They were really interested in that pre-K to first grade, so simplified the interface. We're creating more ready-to-do programs, and so we're testing it right now and seeing how that's going in their digital fabrication lab. So when visitors come in, they can actually do an activity. Sometimes there's pre-made activities, sometimes it's just the daily challenge, and on the daily challenge, you never know what it's going to be that day. So it's pretty open-ended, and so so that's Fab at Schoolmaker Studio. Fable Vision Learning is our K-12 sales and distribution group, and if you go to Fable Vision Learning, you could find out more about that product. But it's been a really interesting product that we've been kind of developing over the past several years.
It's such a great example of project-based learning. Yeah, I love it. Great. Well, I think that brings us to the end of all of the examples and our formal part of the presentation. We will happily take any questions that you guys have and didn't already in the chat. But thank you so much for sparing your time today, and we look forward to seeing those of you who are going to be at the conference, to seeing you there and meeting up with you.